Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Yeah, so this is an experiment. I am kind of trying out a show format, which is called Strange-nesses. And in this show, I like to discuss the strange, the supernatural, and the unexplained. And Edgar Allan Poe surely fits in this category. And I'll be reading today the Cask of Amontillado, and thank you for joining. If you're here, please feel free to chat. And yeah, so I apologize for the non-period glasses. You know, I had some, and I lost them. So you get to everything looks great except for my glasses. But anyway, that's okay. So the Cask of Amontillado was first published in 1846, and it is set in an unnamed Italian city at carnival time in an unspecified year. And it is about a man taking fatal revenge on a friend who he believes has insulted him. The narrative revolves around a person being buried alive, in this case, immurement. And this source is from Wikipedia, by the way. And this same theme is in other of Poe's stories, like The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart, where someone is buried alive. So, and feel free to chat while I'm talking, by the way. I can see you in the chat window. So the legend behind this story, how it came about, was that the Cask of Amontillado, Poe had first heard the story at the Castle Island in South Boston, Massachusetts. And when he was a private stationed at Fort Independence in 1827. And according to the legend, he saw a monument to a Lieutenant Robert Massey. And according to records, Massey had been killed in a sword duel on Christmas Day in 1817 by Lieutenant Gustavus Drain following a dispute during a card game. The legend states that other soldiers then took their revenge on Drain by getting him drunk, luring him into the dungeon, chaining him to a wall, and sealing him in a vault. Turns out that this story is actually false. And Drain was actually court-martialed for the killing and was later acquitted and lived until 1846. So the story is about revenge and the desire for revenge. And at that time, there was actually, and this is, I'm getting various sources. Most are Wikipedia. Other is an academic source called Course Hero. But Wikipedia also has academic sources to back them up, so I made sure. At this time of writing The Cask of Amontillado, there was another writer called Thomas Dunn English, and he had publicly Poe had publicly ridiculed English's work. English returned the favor and included an alcoholic, dysfunctional character modeled after Poe in one of his novels. The character Marmaduke Hammerhead is described as a man who never gets drunk more than 5 days a week. Poe modeled the antagonist, Fortunato, after English in his translation. And there's actually some interesting details about this. I was so excited when I found this. Poe had actually sued Thomas Dunn English for going a little, too far. He had sued him for libel, you see. And there, in this revenge novel that was published by English was called The Power of SF, and it included this character called Marmaduke Hammerhead. And the parody that he created was of a drunkard, liar, and abusive lover, and that was supposed to be Poe. Poe responded with the Cask of Amontillado, using very specific references to English's novel. So Fortunato makes reference to the secret society of the Masons, similar to the secret society in 1844, and even makes a gesture similar to one portrayed in 1844, a signal of distress. And you'll see this in the story when I read it. English had also used an image of a token with a hawk grasping a snake in its claws, similar to Montresor's coat of arms, bearing a foot stomping on a snake, though in this image the snake is biting the heel. In fact, much of the scene of the Cask of Amontillado comes from a scene in 1844 and takes place in a subterranean vault. In the end, then, it is Poe who punishes with impunity by not taking credit for his own literary revenge, and by crafting a concise tale as opposed to a novel with a singular effect, as he'd suggested in an essay of his. There's also talk that this was inspired by the Washingtonian movement, which promoted temperance in drinking of alcohol. So drinking of too much alcohol, it's thought that this tale is supposed to try to I guess promote temperance in drinking. And you'll see in the tale, because one of the characters, Fortunato, drinks way too much, and Montresor keeps giving him alcohol, and he keeps taking it, and with that is able to lure him to his demise. Before I start the story, I wanted to read something by someone on Goodreads. It's a Tatiana. I really liked her description of the story. Our narrator Montresor, an Italian nobleman, explains in a suspiciously vague way how his friend Fortunato has mortally offended and insulted him. Montresor sets himself on a course of implacable revenge, but he wants to do so in a way that Fortunato understands that Montresor is the source of revenge, but without being caught or punished. Montresor and Fortunato meet during a carnival festival, which at first seems by chance, but then you find out that Montresor has set up the situation so that all of his servants are gone. He told them that he would be out all night, but that they were not permitted to leave and counted on the lure of the carnival to do the rest. Montresor tells Fortunato that he has bought a cask of fine Amontillado sherry at full price, but he isn't certain if it's the real thing. Fortunato, a connoisseur of old wines, volunteers to taste it. And so the two go, Montresor first donning a mask, to Montresor's palazzo, and then into the depths of its damp catacombs, hung with white wives of nitre, Montresor protesting all the time that his friend really shouldn't come, but all the time luring him like an evil-hearted spider. And finally, two interesting things. This story has been the source of a lot of literary research, and something I found on this was by Garrett Cohen. He says this, particularly about the dress of the two, Montresor versus Fortunato. He says, Montresor has no regrets or hesitations during the cold-blooded murder of Fortunato. Poe writes, putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. That's in the story. The black mask covering Montresor's face can be seen as being very Gothic and relating to death. In contrast, Fortunato is wearing something completely opposite. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. Fortunato's colorful and playful outfit represents his vulnerability and weakness. The fact that Montresor wears the colors of death and Fortunato wears the colors of innocence is consistent with the idea that Montresor is a cold-blooded killer. So without further ado, let's start the story. And please feel free to chat while I read. I don't mind stopping. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Fortunato had hurt me 1,000 times, and I had suffered quietly. But then I learned that he had laughed at my proud name, Montresor, the name of an old and honored family. I promised myself that I would make him pay for this, that I would have revenge. You must not suppose, however, that I spoke of this to anyone. I would make him pay, yes, but I would act only with the greatest care. I must not suffer as a result of taking my revenge. A wrong is not made right in that manner. And also the wrong would not be made right unless Fortunato knew that he was paying and knew who was forcing him to pay. I gave Fortunato no cause to doubt me. I continued to smile in his face, and he did not understand that I was now smiling at the thought of what I had planned for him, at the thought of my revenge. Fortunato was a strong man, a man to be feared, but he had one great weakness. He liked to drink good wine, and indeed he drank much of it. So he knew a lot about fine wines, and proudly believed that he was a trained judge of them. I, too, knew old wines well, and I bought the best I could find, and wine, I thought, wine would be my revenge. It was almost dark one evening in the spring when I met Fortunato in the street alone. He spoke to me more warmly than was usual, for already he had drunk more wine than was good for him. I acted pleased to see him, and I shook his hand as if he had been my closest friend. Fortunato, how are you? Montresor, good evening, my friend. My dear Fortunato, I am indeed glad that I have met you. I was just thinking of you, for I have been tasting my new wine. I have bought a full cask of a fine wine, which they tell me is Amontillado, but Amontillado, quite impossible. I know, it does not seem possible. As I could not find you, I was just going to walk to Lucrezi. If anyone understands wines, it is Lucrezi. He will tell me. Lucrezi! He does not know one fine wine from another. But they say he knows as much about wines as you know. Oh, come, let us go. Go where? To your vaults to taste the wine. No, my friend, no. I can see that you are not well, and the vaults are cold and wet. I do not care. Let us go. I'm well enough. The cold is nothing, Amontillado. Someone is playing games with you. And Lucrezi, ha! Lucrezi knows nothing about wines, nothing at all. As he spoke, Fortunato took my arm, and I allowed him to hurry me to my great stone palace, where my family, the Montresors, had lived for centuries. There was no one at home. I had told the servants that they must not leave the palace, as I would not return until the following morning, and they must care for the place. Thus, this I knew was enough to make it certain that they would all leave as soon as my back was turned. I took down from one of their places on the wall 2 brightly burning lights. I gave one of these to Fortunato and led him to a wide doorway. There we could see the stone steps going down into the darkness. Asking him to be careful as he followed, I went down before him, down under the ground, deep under the old walls of my palace. We came finally to the bottom of the steps and stood there a moment together. The earth which formed the floor was cold and hard. We were entering the last resting place of the dead of the Montresor family. Here, too, we kept our finest wines, here in the cool, dark, still air under the ground. Fortunato's step was not sure, because of the wine he had been drinking. He looked uncertainly around him, trying to see through the thick darkness which pushed in around us. Here our brightly burning lights seemed weak indeed, but our eyes soon became used to the darkness. We could see the bones of the dead lying in large piles along the walls. The stones of the walls were wet and cold. From the long rows of bottles which were lying on the floor, among the bones I chose one which contained a very good wine. Since I did not have anything to open the bottle with, I stuck the stone wall with it and broke off the small end. I offered the bottle to Fortunato. The bottle might have been something like this. Here, Fortunato, drink of this Medoc. It will help to keep us warm. Drink. Thank you, my friend. I drink to the dead who lie sleeping around us. And I, Fortunato, I drink to your long life. Ah, a very fine wine indeed, but the Amontillado. It is farther on. Come. We walked for some time. We were now under the river's bed, and water fell in drops upon us from above. There seems to be no end. Fell in drops from us above. Deeper into the ground we went, past still more bones. Your vaults are many and large. There seems to be no end to them. We are a great family, and an old one. It is not far now, but I can see you are trembling with the cold. Come, let us go back before it is too late. It is nothing. Let us go on. But first, another drink of your Medoc. I took up from among the bones another bottle. It was another wine of a fine quality, de Grave. Again I broke off the neck of the bottle. Fortunato took it and drank it all without stopping for a breath. He laughed and threw the empty bottle over his shoulder. We went on deeper and deeper into the earth. Finally we arrived at a vault in which the air was so old and heavy that our lights almost died. Against 3 of the walls there were piles of bones higher than our heads. From the 4th wall someone had pulled down all the bones, and they were spread all around us on the ground. In the middle of the wall was an opening into another vault, if I can call it that, a little room about 3 feet wide, 6 or 7 feet high, and perhaps 4 feet deep. It was hardly more than a hole in the wall. Go on, I said. Go in. The Amontillado is in there. Fortunato continued to go forward, uncertainly. I followed him immediately. Soon, of course, he reached the back wall. He stood there for a moment, facing the wall, surprised and wondering. In that wall were 2 heavy iron rings. A short chain was hanging from one of these, and a lock from the other. Before Fortunato could guess what was happening, I closed the lock and chained him tightly to the wall. I stepped back. Fortunato, I said, put your hand against the wall. You must feel how the water runs over it. Once more I ask you, please, will you not go back? No? If not, then I must leave you. But first, I must do everything I can for you. But, the Amontillado! Ah, yes, indeed, the Amontillado. As I spoke these words, I began to search among the bones. Throwing them to one side, I found the stones which earlier I had taken down from the wall. Quickly, I began to build the wall again, covering the hole where Fortunato stood trembling. Montresor, what are you doing? I continued working. I could hear him pulling at the chain, shaking it wildly. Only a few stones remained to put in their place. Montresor, haha, this is a very good joke indeed. Many times will we laugh about it, haha, as we drink our wine together, haha. Of course, as we drink the Amontillado. But is it not late? Should we not be going back? They will be all expecting us. Let us go. Yes, let us go. As I said this, I lifted the last stone from the ground. Montresor, for the love of God! Yes, for the love of God. I heard no answer. Fortunato! I cried. Fortunato! I heard only a soft, low sound, a half-cry of fear. My heart grew sick. It must have been the cold. I hurried to force the last stone into its position, and I put the old bones again in a pile against the wall. For half a century now, no human hand has touched them. May he rest in peace. That is the end of the story. Thank you for watching.
Make me some hotcakes and sausage, make 'em nice and brown. Hotcakes and sausage, flip 'em upside down. I'm so tired of roaming, gone from town to town. Made up my mind now, I'm gonna settle down. So mix 'em with some loving, you know the kind I need. Then serve them with your hugging, some coffee, some cream. Hotcakes and sausage, kiss me honey-do, 'cause your brand new loving brought me home to you. Put my pillow, sat her down, said a sad goodbye. Said so long to pals in town, a tear was in my eye. I took a ship for Paris, France, stopped to see a vet. I asked her for a bite to eat.
She gave him crepe Suzette.
Make me some hotcakes and sausage, will ya? Make 'em nice